Welcome everybody. Already on today's webinar, we're going to give people just a few more. Hello everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today, Census-Based Budgeting, Planning, and Forecasting for Healthcare. I'm Tracy Thompson, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we jump in, I'm going to briefly go over how to use the webinar console. The orange arrow on the right will let you toggle the control tray open or closed. At the bottom of the control tray, you'll see a chat window. Please feel free to submit any of your questions throughout the webinar for our presenters via the chat function. We will also have a Q&A later, but if we don't get to them today, we'll be sure to respond to your questions after the webinar. Audio settings. On your GoToWebinar console, you will see an area for audio settings. If you're calling in through your telephone, please choose the Use Telephone option. And if you're using your computer speakers, please select the Use Mic and Speakers option. Additionally, I would like to note this webinar will be recorded. We will also send out the slides as well as a link to the on-demand recording if the webinar within 48 hours. Please keep an eye out for this email if you're interested in viewing the webinar after today or sharing it with any of your colleagues who couldn't make it. We are also offering CPE today's presentation. To qualify for CPE, you must use a personal computer, no smartphones, and log in on your own information and unique URL. Be logged into our online software for at least 50 consecutive minutes within the scheduled time frame of the webinar. Actively respond to at least 75% of the polling questions and complete the evaluation survey at the end of the webinar. With that, I'd like to introduce some of the learning objectives, agenda, introductions. So some of our learning objectives today are discover how healthcare peers in planning's revenue and expense based on forecasted census. Examine current state and how to leverage systems alternatives for planning, budgeting, and reporting. Evaluate the system roll-up capabilities for a faster consolidation process. Investigate drill-through capabilities to research variances and the root cause of data anomalies. Build a what-if scenario to provide insight of considering various business options. And the agenda for today, we have some introductions. We have an Adaptive Insights Healthcare overview, an Armanino Trends in Healthcare, Adaptive Insights Healthcare demo, and a Crestwood Behavioral Success Story, followed by Q&A. Now I'd like to go into some introductions. On today's webinar, you'll see the presenters on your screen. Amy Morgan, Director in Consulting from Armanino, Bob Goodell, Healthcare Account Executive West from Adaptive Insights, Karen Flannery, Adaptive Account Executive East, Adaptive Insights, and Margarita Rosero, Executive Director of Finance and Accounting at Crestwood Behavioral Health Incorporated. And now with that, I'd like to get started and pass it over to Bob, who's going first for today.
Thank you so much, Tracy. It's great to be on the call. It's always exciting to talk about adaptive and planning and healthcare. Here is the Gartner Magic Quadrant for cloud financial planning. And if you look in the leaders quadrant, which is the upper right quadrant, you've got Oracle, Anaplan, and what's called Workday parentheses Adaptive Insights. Workday acquired Adaptive Insights August of 2018. So we are most pleased to be in this leaders quadrant. We are the only leader in that quadrant that really came out of the middle enterprise space. And we really are known for being a very easy to use, implement, and maintain cloud planning solution. Next slide. Now, active planning, we have a point of view here as adaptive. We think that there are really three key requirements needed for an agile planning solution. You need a broad cross-functional participation and visibility, high fidelity visibility into every level of the operational function, and ongoing measurement and decision making and fine tuning. These really build into a complete solution for our customers. The broad cross-functional participation and visibility, that is really reflected in the ease of use. And you can advance the slides. Thanks, Brian. It really is part of the ease of use and implementation of the solution. The comprehensive nature of getting all the data into the model allows for a very powerful model that can analyze your entire business, not just chunks of it or not just a spreadsheet's worth of your business, and then continuous iterative power to rerun the model as needed as business conditions change is so critical. This model is in the cloud, so it's real time and available to anybody with access to your planning solution. Now in healthcare, this is really critical because you want your planning solution to be used by everyone possible so that you have the broadest participation in your planning model. And we all know healthcare is a very data intensive operation, right? With many departments, many specialties. And so having a comprehensive solution really lets you reach out and pull that data in from everywhere. And we all know in healthcare that reacting to the business at hand and changing conditions is really the difference between a successful healthcare enterprise and one that struggles. Adaptive has what we call the business planning cloud. It's a cloud planning solution for the entire healthcare enterprise, from finance, which is a typical FP&A solution, right, to do your annual budgeting and quarterly and monthly and weekly forecasting, to something called workforce planning, which is emerging as a very important area of interest, not just in healthcare, but across all industries. Things like, headcount is one dimension there, but also workforce planning really engages the HCM team and the HR team around skills, talent, recruiting, filling needs in the healthcare system. And a robust workforce planning system can really take a healthcare operation, a healthcare provider to the next level. Then below that, you've got the operational plan. How are we doing on capacity? How are we performing relative to our peers, relative to internal benchmarks? Very, very interesting applications of the Adaptive Insights Business Planning Cloud from an operational standpoint. And lastly, you've got the strategic plan, which is usually known as the long-term plan, but also capital requirements inside of healthcare enterprises are often significant, and projects need to be tracked, updated, and analyzed for success and for areas where there are gaps and opportunities for improvement. The Adaptive Insights Business Planning Cloud is, as I said before, is an in-memory solution. It's robust. Adaptive is the first cloud pure planning solution, and that's what gives it its power and its real-time updates and availability to your entire team. Adaptive also integrates to any data source. We integrate to over 230 data sources in the history of Adaptive Insights, going back to 2003. We can integrate with common enterprise resource planning solutions such as Lawson or Oracle or NetSuite, or even, of course, Workday's financial solution, but also to what we call, EHR systems such as Epic and Cerner, and bringing in the Census to look at census versus financials type of KPIs and types of analysis. This solution is built for business users. You're going to listen to Margarita later, who's just a fantastic Adaptive customer, and we're so fortunate and blessed to have her on this call today. And she can speak directly to how Adaptive is a solution that the business users really own, maintain, and operate. A couple examples in planning of in healthcare, and these are areas that where Adaptive really shines. Coming up with a new what-if model in reaction to something going on either with your census that's picked up in your EHR system, or some change in the physician makeup of your organization is something that that Adaptive can provide. Also looking through the labor costs or the supply costs and in terms of different time periods and skill mixes are really areas where Adaptive can be turned to analyze and notice gaps in future periods and let the hospital or healthcare provider make adjustments before these these situations occur. Continually monitoring and adjusting for your skill and your staffing levels, and doing more things around anticipation based on historical trends, things like seasonality, uh, readmissions, the case mix. If you're experiencing kind of a case mix change in your enterprise, uh, it will show up in the data in adaptive in terms of the cost makeup, and you can then make changes to your plan and forecast and plan appropriately and anticipate instead of just react to situations after they occur. Also, we talked about broad collaboration across the healthcare enterprise. And this is an area most suited to healthcare in that healthcare entities are very quality focused and like to use benchmarks to measure quality against different groups internally and externally in different provider environments. And adaptive allows you to bring in that data and also slice and dice the data within the model so that you can compare performance, you can compare actuals, and you can compare forecasts across different groups, and then say who's doing it best and where are there areas for improvement in my organization. And the whole notion here is that you get your organization to perform at a higher level and deliver results to your patient community. Next, thanks. Um, in the value of planning and healthcare, really it falls into two major areas. One is that it moves finance to a strategic position, and two is that it lets you make decisions better and faster with the data that you have. You can move in the finance function to a strategic uh, role in the company. Really is based on, instead of using your finance professionals to just gather and sort data and kind of argue over who has the right numbers, the numbers are in automatically into the adaptive model. So they move from a data collection role to an analysis role, right? Where they're advising senior management on trends and new opportunities and areas where of opportunity within the enterprise for either cost improvement or improved quality. And those cycles, those faster cycles, you can accelerate your planning and reporting by at least 50%. We've seen tremendous improvements in cycle times to put together a new report in our customer base. That's because of the in-memory solution of adaptive and its ability to analyze the data in real time. In terms of accelerating decisions, it's not any good to accelerate decisions if they're bad decisions. So we have all the accurate data, we have the collaboration across the enterprise. Now we have timely visibility into risk and opportunity. So when you reforecast and you look at your dashboard and you make decisions, it's all built on a solid foundation. You can get reports out immediately to the web, and also to Excel. Integrates well with Oracle. With Microsoft's suite. And then finally, if you want to run a what if model and look at that, look at the new what if model against your current plan or against past time periods, you have unlimited versions in adaptive, and you can run these what if models. Departments can run what if models and really compare your projected performance and get to the highest level of performance for the entire organization. You can also report on variances and do things with statistics that are intended to enlighten the entire team on ways where the quality and the healthcare provider can perform at its highest level. And finally, we were so happy to have Margarita on from Crestwood, but we have a great network of healthcare provider and payer customers. Some are on the slide here. We're really excited about the opportunity in healthcare. We're really excited about the fit that Adaptive has in the healthcare community, mostly because of its ease of use, ease of implementation, and ease of maintenance over time. We're very excited to be on this webinar today, very excited to work with Armanino, who is just a tremendous partner, and thanks for having me on the WebEx today. Tracy?
Thanks, Bob. So now we'll start with our first polling question. Has your organization implemented rolling forecasts? Please select yes, no, or we are interested but not currently doing it. There are no correct answers for these polling questions, but please remember that if you are trying to get CPE, you do need to answer at least 75% of the polling questions. All right, and I'll give one more second here, and Brian, let's see the results. All right, so we have 50% yes, 43% no, and 70% we're interested but not currently doing it. Bob, did you have any comments on the results at all?
Just my quick reaction is that we have a very advanced group participating in the WebEx. A 50% number for a rolling forecast is high. I've done a few different sessions and never got over 33% there. So congratulations to the team. For the folks that aren't doing it, it's with Adaptive, it's relatively easy, and we can help you get there.
Awesome, thank you. All right, next I'll hand it over to Amy for healthcare trends.
Sure, thanks, Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
Just wait for the next slide to pop up. Thanks. This is Amy Morgan. I'm a director here at Armanino and have FP&A experience at 2 Fortune 100 companies, as well as previously working over at Adaptive Insights. So I've been in the software since 2007 and worked a lot with both Adaptive and their partner community. Armanino has a broad footprint supporting the CFO and controller's offices, especially in the healthcare industry, with various practices. And what we've done is taken what we've learned, not just from our adaptive healthcare, but from our various consulting practices, and put some of our observations for current healthcare trends together to share. The first is a shift in value and pricing, and really an evolution that we're seeing, a shift from the fee-for-service approach into value pricing. So rather than pricing specific activities, pricing an outcome. And as you can imagine, that has a lot of implications for finance folks that are trying to project revenue and forecast based on what the patients are doing, and looking at now we're having to forecast outcomes rather than forecasting the specific activities to get the revenue side of that. We're also seeing a shift in financial responsibility, with patients paying more premiums, out-of-pocket costs than before. And so that also then shifts how healthcare providers are getting paid. On the cost management side, kind of the perennial trend, continued emphasis on managing costs. Real focus on total cost of care. So looking for ways to move the patient most effectively through their healthcare process, and really looking at the total cost and total outcome. There's also, we're seeing a lot of automation on the procure to pay process, really putting systems in place to contain costs and negotiate better contracted rates. And finally, with technical advances, we're seeing differences in how services are being delivered. So the first being increased use of virtual office visits, phone-based services, where they're using innovation in ways to drive better patient outcomes, and really doing things remotely in a way that would be too costly to provide at times with on-site clinical staff. Where would a technology presentation be nowadays without mentioning artificial intelligence or AI? And healthcare companies are starting to use AI and machine learning to help early identify at-risk patients and populations. So those two technological trends coming together are resulting in the creation of chief data analytics officer roles in a lot of organizations, where they're again focused on really using technology to predict and improve patient outcomes. As we'll see in the next slide, we can also look at how Adaptive can help you with the impact of these changes. So the first being on the revenue modeling side, as the approaches to charging for services changes, being able to keep up with that and model, or even if you have a few different thoughts and approaches towards modeling, even setting several up, and you can run what-if comparisons between them. What those what-if scenarios let you do is adjust assumptions like census, payer mixes, reimbursement rates, whatever's impacting those different scenarios. Adaptive also lets you do reporting by fund. So for those of you who have donors, oftentimes they'll have some additional reporting requirements, and you can give visibility to how restricted funds were received and how they were spent. And then finally, we support data analytics in providing one source of truth for reporting, tracking spending, streamlining that revenue analysis, and providing instant roll-ups, instant consolidations, as well as breakouts by location and department. So if we go on next, I believe we have another polling question.
We do. We have our second polling question of the webinar. What tools are you using for budgeting? Please select one: Excel, on-premise solution, cloud solution, or none of the above. And just a reminder, we are able to send out this recording of today's webinar with the slides. So if anyone wants to reference those later, you can, but only CP is provided for those participating today. And I'll give a few more seconds. All right, and let's see the results here. So we have most people using Excel at 86%, and then pretty even with the on-premise and cloud. Amy, did you have any comments on the results?
Taking myself off mute. Really not a surprise here. Excel is the tool that almost everybody uses to get their first budgets up and running, and probably the most common tool that we see in place. So not at all surprised there.
Awesome. And if you do want to specify the cloud solution or on-premise you're using in the chat, that works as well. And then next we will bring it back to Amy for the healthcare demo.
Okay, sounds great. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and Tracy, are you able to see my screen okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so just giving a brief demo on how we've used Adaptive to help healthcare companies. Adaptive is a cloud-based solution, which means anywhere you have an internet connection and a browser, you're able to log in into Adaptive. So here's an example of what the login screen looks like. I've gone ahead, logged in, and am now working live in an Adaptive demo instance here. Adaptive does work with various ERP systems. I know Bob mentioned a bunch. We see a lot of Microsoft GP, Intacct, Nav, NetSuite, and D365, just to name drop a few. And here in the demo, some of the things I wanted to showcase were forecasting revenue and revenue capacity by census, being able to instantly consolidate financials with multiple practice lines, streamlining the budgeting process, giving easy-to-use census-driven financial reporting, being able to analyze the data, and then being able to get data from sources, some of those source systems. So Adaptive is in-memory cloud-based application. If you're not a big technical person, I know the first time I heard that kind of went, okay, whatever. But it's actually a very important feature of the product. It means that there's one version of the truth when the data is put into the database. There's nothing to sync up or as far as syncing cubes or anything like that. The data is all available and live within the system. Adaptive also does system updates 2 to 3 times a year. Like other cloud software, those updates are automatically there. So you come in Monday morning and you go, oh, have a refreshed view, usually a little bit of an improved user interface, as well as the additional functionality that comes in with each of those updates. But enough of me talking, let's get into the demo. On the upper left here, we've got a navigation hamburger, and this shows you some of the different pieces in Adaptive. I'm coming in today as a super admin, so really seeing not only the software, but some of the behind the scenes pieces. What we're going to be spending time on today are the sheets. This is how we interact with the data, so think of these looking and feeling a lot like Excel. We'll be looking at reports, so how we can get information out of the system. I have a couple of these favorited, so they're easy to pull up. We'll look at discovery, see some visualization of other items. And then I think that will pretty well cover us today. When I logged in, my access was role-based. So when I came in as an admin, again, I have access to quite a bit. Most users, when they're coming in, would be seeing, some sheets, some reports, and some dashboards, but seeing a more limited view. When we come in, let's start by looking at these sheets. In the highest level view, we'll start with looking at a P&L. It jumped me over to reports. Let me try that again. All right. So just getting into Adaptive, waiting for my internet connection to catch up with me here. So what we're looking at is an income statement. Just to get you a little bit oriented here, on the upper right, what I have is the organization structure. So here in this demo example, I have a site, and then I have the different operations within that site. So an ops group, surgery, lab, anesthesiology, etc. I can come in, again, I can give people access to any specific department, or in this case, I have access to all of them, so I could immediately see a roll-up of the entire organization. We're going to start with just looking at things in the Site 1 operations group. Okay. Right above where we were looking at our organization structure, we can see the versions. Versions, if you think of Excel as kind of like doing a save as, well, we have the same idea with versions. So in this case, we have a version with actuals. So we have one version of the truth. Every month, we'll bring those actuals in from our ERP system, have the controller bless them, and now we know that the data has been synced up between the ERP system, the various other databases or other systems holding data for us, and Adaptive. And then for planning purposes and forecasting purposes, we'll usually start out with creating a budget, and then in a month we could say, okay, for historical months, we'll bring in the actuals for those, and then we can reforecast and run what ifs to actually compare those. I'm going to, in these versions here, I'm going to jump over to a clone I did of the budget into this what if that I created for demo purposes. Okay, then as we come along on the left-hand side, we can see the accounts, and this is set up and would be set up to really align with your chart of accounts. So in this case, we're looking at some gross patient revenues, some allowances, write-offs, and then we can have a view where we're actually looking at that net patient revenue, and then we have the expenses. Here in Adaptive, we have the cells that, again, look and feel a lot like Excel. Some of them are white, which means I can come in and I can edit those. Others were locked out, which means the person controlling the budgeting process wants the data in there to either be updated by looking at a feeder schedule, or that data is already put in place and been locked up. So when we come into this sheet, we can show you some of the historical information before we start talking about planning additional information. One of the items we have is, let's say, our historical data that Adaptive presents in the green numbers. At any point, I can come in and I can look at that historical information and simply drill on that. Let me go ahead and actually show a different month. And if I look at my actuals data, I might see here that in my travel experience, I had pretty consistently $2,000 to $3,000 a month, and then I saw that jump into March. What I can do in Adaptive to quickly research what that amount is I can come in and say, explore cell, drill into transactions, and now it shows me the detail behind all of those transactions. I notice this bottom one here that says marketing luncheon at Nico's on the Lake, and I go, I'm not the marketing department, that probably shouldn't have hit mine. So I very quickly can come in, look at my actuals, research those, drill in on those, and depending on your preference, I can either take a screenshot of this, push it out into Excel, and send a note over to my friends in accounting and CC marketing and let them know that we need to get that amount moved. So very easy to research some of those actual details in Adaptive. For budgeting purposes now, when we're actually looking at future months, we can go in and simply update numbers here in Adaptive. Before we do so, I just wanted to show you that we do have a budget version and a what if, and starting out, I've set them up to be the same. So here you can see a report that's showing for my Site 1 operations organization, my budget for my different GL accounts matches my what if scenario. Now we're going to have some fun and actually update numbers, and then we can watch in the report as they change. So first thing we could do is maybe look at our drug expense and simply say we had that at $5,000 a month, was advised that we're seeing an increase in that next month, and that we're next year going to be expecting that to come in more like $6,000 a year instead of $5,000. You saw how quickly I was able to just enter in the number and get that updated in the system. If I had data in Excel, I could also just copy and paste that very easily in here. Let's go ahead and pick on, let's say for direct mail, I would be able to simply cut and paste data that came in and pop it in. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and hand key it in. And instead of putting it in the particular month, I'm going to go to the year and say that this will be something I planned for the year, and it's going to be 8,000 for the year. Adaptive's going to say, well, I want to see that 8,000 into the months. I could just break it back proportionally using the breakout I currently have. I could use my prior year actuals. I could just divide by 12, or I could use a 4-5-4 pattern. I'll go ahead and use one of those. Sorry, I broke it back in the quarter. Let's try breaking it back over the full year. One more time, maybe. And there we go. We can also add additional detail as we're planning expenses. So in this case, we have some medical supplies, and just for demonstration purposes, just showing a brief explanation. One of the ways this is especially powerful is if you have somebody who wants to build up their expenses and they don't need to necessarily maintain that extra Excel spreadsheet to show the breakout, they can do it right here. What I really like about this is we allow them to add that detail, and it's not impacting my chart of accounts. So I can go here and, as a user, at my leisure, add in additional accounts. In this case, I'm starting some spending as of April. So we've made some various changes. I'll go ahead. A lot of times as we're adding additional expense, we'll want to add in a note. So here I can, similar to Excel, we could add in medical supply X. I could add that additional explanation. It does give me a red triangle, which is a visual indicator that there's a note there, as well as when I produce reports, that note does come along with that data item. Let me go ahead and save this. And what you'll see is all those blue numbers are now going to turn black, which means they're now saved within the database. And what we can feature now is looking at, a lot of times if you're looking at a budget, you go, boy, I wonder how that number got there. Was it somebody who came in and adjusted a number from what I submitted? Well, in Adaptive, I have a complete audit trail. I can't tell you how many situations this has helped resolve for folks. So I have a full audit trail of what the data used to be. And then in this case, there was nothing there. And then on December 3rd at 10:36 Pacific time, Amy Morgan came in and changed that to 500 and also added a note. So if I came in, changed it again to 750 and saved, the audit trail would pick up that change as well. Let's quickly jump over to reports. I'll rerun this report, and you can start seeing some variances come up between the different versions. So you can see how easy it is to take a budget, spin off a copy of it, and then change various numbers within it. You might notice some of these numbers here have purple triangles in the corner. That's a visual indicator that there's actually a formula behind the scenes. So in this case, we have a schedule that has salary personnel information, and out of that, we're calculating salaries and bringing that over, as well as we have the ability to put in some driver-based formulas. So in this case, for workers' comp, we're just coming in and looking at our head count and then multiplying that by a global assumption we have in place. Again, can go back to our Explore cell. And if we wanted to take a closer look at what that is, I can see the exact account names, and I can see that number actually being evaluated. If you end up getting a trial instance, these are kind of fun to just start clicking on the hot links, and you can trace them through and find the sources of information in the system. So Adaptive has ways we can bring in some of that feeder information. We can have sheets similar to this where we just have are capturing in various expense drivers and rates. We can have data that, like a personnel sheet, is a roster with things like personnel information, where we can then calculate things like salaries and taxes and benefits behind the scenes. And then the third type is a cube sheet. And what that is similar to this, but allows us to do some extra slicing and dicing. I do want to show that off as we take a look at some of the census-based budgeting that we do here in Adaptive. So in this case, we're doing some revenue planning, and we're actually getting specific by procedure, planning in our inpatient expectations and then revenue that's coming out of that. We'll start with just going to picking on one of the procedures here. So we'll look at the CTs. And we have a patient level here. Now, if we came in and we said that we're actually able to add some capacity or take other measures where we can increase that patient count, what I can do is change that here, save it, and now we'll be able to see the resulting calculations come out of that. So what this sheet is doing is taking that patient count and then multiplying it by our average bill rate, and then also taking in assumptions like what % of our charges are from Blue Cross and what our reimbursement rates are from Medicaid, Medicare, and then also looking at our overall payer mix. And from that, we can calculate out, again, with some more assumptions we have behind the scenes, a gross patient revenue, our allowances, charity care, and then coming up with that net patient revenue. These cube sheets are can be very helpful to work with. In this case, I was just looking at the one procedure. If I quickly wanted to update the patient count for all of the procedures, I just clicked and dragged that on top of patients. At least I thought I did. Let's try that again. Okay, my computer's not cooperating with me, but we can actually change this and pivot it around. Don't worry about that too much. Let's go back to our report. We'll actually rerun this and we'll see that gross patient revenue number change as well, and our allowances change as well. So we can make various changes and then we can look at what that financial outcome is from that. Wanted to show off a couple of other reports we have here in Adaptive. So if we, let's navigate back and we look at reports, we can look at a monthly variance report. These are especially helpful if we're on a monthly basis, bringing in those actuals and then wanting to see that differences between budget and actuals. In this case now, I can look at those variances. Oh, I had no expense come in for drugs. I had some budget, and I can go ahead and add a note here of why that is. So if we come back here, if I was doing my variance report and I was looking at travel, holy cow, this is coming in at $11,000. I can simply click on that $11,000 number. Hopefully this is starting to look familiar to you. And I can immediately find that that was from that marketing luncheon. So now I can come in and try again, add a note and say marketing luncheon erroneous. The charged will reverse in April, unless I was lucky enough to catch it before the books closed. And you can see now that that note has been brought into the report. Another report that I think is helpful is we can look at any data that we have here in Adaptive. So for example, I could look at my KPIs that I want to take a look at with my inpatient metrics per inpatient and then per head. And I can not only look at that data, but I could actually break it out, in this case, by the various labs. Finally, I'll show the dashboarding features within Adaptive. And then Marguerite, I'll be done and you can start sharing some of your experiences working in the tool. So here in the dashboards, we have visual representation of that data, which many people find very helpful. Let me just switch this over to where I know I've got that data in March. And we can see in this case some KPIs we wanted to keep our eye on and some trends. Over in expenses, a lot of folks like to get that scorecard view, as well as here one more place where I could come in. I see that anomaly pop up with the expense, drill into transactions, and wouldn't you know, it's that marketing luncheon. So that piece of data can be represented in so many different places. And finally, we also have various other graphs where we can look at breakouts of data. So that was a very quick, brief demonstration of Adaptive's capabilities, really specific for healthcare companies with that census-based planning. I am seeing some requests come in for some more in-depth demos, so please connect with us after the presentation. We can give you a demo highlighting Adaptive's full capabilities. What I'd like to do now is welcome Margarita Rosero, who heads up the Crestwood Behavioral Health Finance and Accounting Organization, to share a little bit of her experience.
Thank you, Amy. And I think we do have one polling question before we pull on Margarita. So polling question number 3. What are your biggest budgeting challenges? Please select all that apply. Demographics, aging and population, clinical and technology advances, raising labor costs, increasing regulation, or affordability. All right, I'll give a few more seconds here. All right, and we can show the results. So pretty wide spread there, kind of interesting. Amy, did you want to comment on any of that?
Some of these are a little bit more healthcare specific, especially with the impact of the population demographic changes. We are seeing regulation strongly within healthcare and other industries, and then rising labor costs. Just we're seeing that across all areas as well.
Awesome. All right, I'd like to introduce Margarita from Crestwood Behavioral. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. This is Margarita. Thank you, Armanino and Adaptive, for inviting me to this wonderful webinar. And basically, I just want to share kind of like before Adaptive and after Adaptive. So in 2017, it's when we started looking into a platform which I saw Adaptive back in 2014, and let me tell you, I regretted not implementing before, because the ROI comes immediately. There's the employee morale, the employee satisfaction, and the whole department is tremendously done through Adaptive, because I wasn't surprised either about the 86% of folks using Excel, and it's because it's easy for us to use, easy to maneuver, and adding a lot of assumptions depending on the sites, especially if you have more than one facility. It's easier to link workbooks, and the flexibility that Excel provides. It's not an easy system to do it within any ERP system. That's how I felt it. So the other item that I saw about Adaptive is the little involvement on the IT department, because we think that it is a web-based platform. We may need a lot of other resources, and raising labor costs is a big drama, and we need to think about the headcounts. And I was able to roll out the whole system within our financial team. So I don't think oh, perfect, thank you. So the benefits that Adaptive provided to Crestwood is providing budgets on an efficient time. I'm in a calendar year, and within the budgets and ending the year, it was a lot of overtime that I can tell you it did occur in the whole team. And also, as we are creating new budgets, we also had also business needs like creating new facilities or creating new category charges. And Adaptive was able to provide that flexibility versus an Excel. If I had to add a row or a new workbook, then now I had to relink it for the consolidation report because we are a single entity with 38 plus facilities. Very user friendly, like I mentioned, we did our whole implementation on our own, and we're very proud of that. Accuracy, that was the other challenge. Like I mentioned, Excel, you insert a row now. Instead of being row 30, all the workbooks, now you added one more. Now you have to manipulate or update all the Excel rows and files versus that Adaptive, as Emmy showed, you are able to add it in a split, and that split will have a brand new category of expense that it doesn't necessarily have to have it a GL account, and instead it will be part of the budget, part of the consolidation. And what I also love about Adaptive was the ability of having global assumptions. So when we roll out budgets, we used to do 1 year budget. Now we do 2 years and moving forward to the rolling forecast. And these global assumptions we were able to do for all the facilities. And also we were able to add it a specific assumptions towards in a specific site. So that was the flexibility that we had it as far as making adjustments. I mentioned about the catering our business needs. We have about different business lines, and some of them are very specific per patient day, so that we can maximize all the costs, making sure that we're budgeting 100% so that we don't lose any money. In our case, on Medical AB 1629, which is our skilled nursing facilities, and making sure that we have all those charges appropriately allocated to a specific payer type. So Adaptive was able to provide that. Like I mentioned, the global assumptions we were doing as a whole company, we had different percentages by either category of expense, or also we had a dollar amounts per patient day. So again, in one single sheet, we were able to add those percentages and change it if needed on any specific month. As you know, we may have a rent increase. For example, here on the property tax, we knew that we had an increase up to the end of the year, and after then it will be flat because then a new fiscal year for the government it starts in July, and here we go, we have the 3%. So the flexibility is what it really drove me to Adaptive and loving it. Flexibility on planning on Census. So again, we have startup facilities that may not have all the data available for a full year. So here I can just change between a year-to-date average to a trailing 3 months, from 1 to 3, and to change the whole formula for this specific payer type, which is managed care in RN, and having the right assumption for going forward, because the data, I may have it only 3 months instead of year to date, or I may have a couple months. And just on a single sheet, I can make all these updates. And I'm running out of time. Okay, going to more into the budget and financial planning. This one also provides in one single sheet, we are providing capital investment projects, which calculates our depreciation, but also help us out with cash flow. So in the past, we had a group of workbooks in Excel just for budgets, but it may not have any relationship to a cash flow. Now we have consolidated and merging all the data within one platform that can give us multiple reports and for multiple solutions. This one also provides, in our case, we had campuses that have more than one program. Like in this case, we have a mental health and a psychiatric facility, and we can easily allocate it based on the specific project, or in this case, the square footage, or it could be to the specific program capital asset that we need to do. Okay, so allocations. So we're able to allocate it by beds, by a square footage, by head count, by expenses, even if we need it. And everything is in one click. So we have that way of having the data integrated, the ability of having combined efforts and a minimum amount. So in the past, it used to take me probably about 3 months gathering data, massaging it so that I can present it to the administrators for their roadmap for the following year. And now everything is within. And let me tell you, our overtime is pretty much gone. And we have one specific person doing adaptive, including myself, a few hours, but it's very user friendly. I will suggest that you can, if you have it Excel, I'm sure you can do it adaptive, and you can go as granular as you want. And this is the best solution for planning in general. It doesn't necessarily have to be financial, but it also can be everything. You know, your headcount, your probation days, easy to do it, new performance for new businesses, and you can, the turnover is quickly. You know, it could be within a day. It used to take us about a couple weeks. So I know I would like to speak more, but we are running out of
No,
time.
Margarita, you can keep going. It's fine. We're good. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, keep
Perfect.
going. Thanks.
So we were able to do adjustments according to our census, like Amy showed adjustments to P&L, having some errors within the P&L, so we can adjust it accordingly. We do adjustments per patient day. Like I said, if we see that we're not maximizing everything that we can do it, let me say specifically on the labor cost, then we can tell right away that we can make it an adjustment. Let's see. So on the reporting, like Amy showed, there is a very great out of the box, and you will have to just cater to your business dashboard. So it gives a better understanding to a non-financial individuals having these visual models. And we also use a component from Adaptive called Office Connect, which uses Excel, and you can pretty much, you're not getting rid of completely Excel. You have it in a way that it connects and it hides items that you don't want it. For example, on the Office Connect, like I mentioned before, we had a big template, and having 5 different business lines, some of them, like the PAV facilities, the psychiatric facilities may not have Medi-Cal for the mental health. So we have to hide that payer type and manually going and hide it if it was the PAV, and so forth and so on. Instead, Office Connect will say, you know, if you don't have any data, if they have 0 values, then hide it. And it's out of a click. And that helped tremendously in our end. Again, it goes back to time.
Margarita, we're just gonna because we are running low on time, we're gonna do the polling question, and then we can
Yeah,
continue on the rest of your slides. So Brian, if you
sure.
just want to do the last polling question for the people getting CPE, great. How soon are you planning to implement a budgeting and forecasting solution? In 2020, in the next 3 years, and I don't know. And do remember, we will be sending this webinar out, so you will get the recording. If you are unable to keep going past 11, we can send you the rest of the webinar recording. All right, and we will do the results here. So we have 38% in 2020, in the next 3 years 15%, and do not know at 46%. Perfect. If you do have to drop, thanks for joining. And Margarita, if you want to continue on the rest of your slides, that'd be great.
Sure. I just quickly wanted to share about reporting in the past. This specific report is a combination of 5 reports that for non-financial individuals is easier to have one single report for all the data needed. So in this case, we had a census report flagged in here, not only for actuals, but also for budget and providing the variances for the monthly performance as well as the year to date. Also, it's a big item to have percentages of revenue to see how much we're spending. There's a benchmark, internal benchmarks that they have, administrators have to take a look, and they have those percentages as well. Again, per patient day cost is provided for actuals and budgets to see how close they are, and the profit margin. It's right there, and we can drill down out of this one single report everything, like Amy showed us, drill the transaction. You can do it out of one single report. Dashboards, like Amy showed, so it has based on the level of the structure of the company. In this case, we have multiple facilities within one entity, and it gives us all the information, but it also dissect the data within the program, so we have the ability to see that. So lastly, I just want to say that it's easy to use. Again, it's easy to read, and the interface with, in our case, is Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains. It's very easy. We can also integrate Excel sheets if you have other users that are just comfortable using Excel and you want to make it a template for them. It can happen that way as well. So Adaptive is very easy to integrate. And reports, again, it consolidates into a single location. You have the ability to do cutting and dicing as you please. And I think we did the polling question.
All right. Thank you so much, Margarita. That was awesome. Yes, so we did complete our 4th polling question, and looks like we still have some people online. So I'm going to look at the questions here. I'm going to pick a few just so we can get in. I know we are late on time. So who maintains Adaptive's insights, finance or IT? Amy, did you want to answer that one?
Yes. It's typically done by the finance organization, and we realize this is a little different than a lot of the on-prem or some of the other software solutions out there. But Adaptive was specifically designed so that the finance team can maintain it without needing to rely on those IT and program resources. That said, the IT organization is extremely important when we're starting to talk about integrating into other systems to make sure we get the appropriate access and know where the data is in those systems.
Perfect. And then how long does a typical Adaptive Insights implementation usually take?
We see them taking on average anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. A lot of it depends on, level of complexity. Our record is 2 weeks. So if it is, very straightforward and we can just someone on site and we just crank through it, we've done that. But that said, without going through any extraordinary measures, and at a good pace to allow you time to review things and make sure, we're setting proper requirements and everything else, 8 to 10 weeks.
Perfect. And then I have one last good one. I have some donors that require us to report on how we spend restricted funds. Does Adaptive offer that capability?
Yes. So if we can track restricted funds as far as the donation coming in or contribution coming in, as well as how that is actually spent, and then provide that reporting out to your end users. We've seen that quite a bit.
Perfect. So that concludes our questions and wraps up our session. I want to thank all of the presenters for our amazing content and audience for the great questions and participation in the polling questions. If you have any questions or concerns about the webinar or about Adaptive, please feel free to reach out to Amy, Bob, or Karen. Their information is here and will be sent out on the webinar. So look out for those slides. They'll be sent out 48 hours from today, and you can forward those to your colleagues as well. Also remember, if you're looking to get to CPE, there's a quick survey at the end, and our learning and development team will check for those and get those certificates out for everyone who is eligible for today's webinar. And with that, thank you, Amy, Bob, Karen, Margarita, and the audience for joining us on our webinar, Census-Based Budgeting, Planning, and Forecasting for Healthcare, and have a great week.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.